Hey, namaste all. Welcome to the Climate Healers Vegan Convergence of the People, wherever you are in the world, in the planet. We're thrilled for you to be here. And we have Alison Hamje, our colleague of Climate Healers, here to share a presentation with Dr. Jeanette Rowley.
Thank you so much, Krishna. Okay, so let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm Alison Hamje, a vegan environmental activist who has lived nearly my entire adult life in Central and South America. And now I live in Lima, Peru. So this presentation is about something that started for me on April 30th, 2024, when I was contacted by the lead attorney for a constitutional case in support of the right to conscience for vegan students at Peru's largest and oldest public university. I was asked if I would be willing to secure international support for the case, and of course I said yes. And this is when I reached out and secured the support of Dr. Rao, the founder of Climate Healers, Dr. Barnard, founder of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, who will also be presenting here tomorrow, and Dr. Jeanette Rowley of the Vegan Society. So these three professionals have been serving as friends of the court in this precedent-setting case. And Jeanette, I would just like to mention that Isaac is also here. The lead attorney is also present here today. But would you, Dr. Rowley, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. I'm having some problems with the sound, Alison. I do apologise. It was broken up, but I did hear you ask me to introduce myself. So at least we've got this far. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alison, for the invitation to join you today. My name is Jeanette Rowley. I'm a consultant to the Vegan Society. I'm a lifelong animal rights activist and vegan for over 40 years. I started the campaign for vegan rights in 2012 and established the International Vegan Rights Alliance. It was very successful, and I gifted all of my work to the Vegan Society in 2019. And I continue to do the same work at the Vegan Society through the International Rights Network. And I supported the court in the recent decision. That's all about me.
Okay, thank you so much. So before we discuss the importance of this case, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to give us an overview of it. And I'm going to go back to 2023. That's how long it's taken. In 2023, some vegan students at UNMSM filed a suit against the university for failing to respect their right to conscience when the university refused to provide even a vegan option at the university cafeteria. So the UNMSM is, as I said, the largest and oldest university in Peru. It's also recognized as the oldest continuously operating university in the Americas. It's a public university, and it has over 45,000 students. All tuition and meals are subsidized, which means that all students should have equal access to free meals. The issue is that the vegan students' formal request for a vegan option did not advance according to the administrative policy. So on behalf of all the vegan student population, one student of law and one student of anthropology took legal action. And these two students solicited and received the legal support of an independent legal defense entity called the Institute of Legal Defense, or IDL, where in 2023, a vegan attorney, who, like I said, is here today, he took on the case representing the two vegan students in a suit against the university. And to make a long story short, with the support of Doctors Rao, Barnard, and Rowley, all acting as friends of the court, this year, on June 3rd, just a little over a month ago, the judge ordered the university to perform a survey to determine how many students would require vegan meals and to immediately begin serving a vegan option. It's important to note that the university has appealed the decision. The judge, however, has since ordered the university to immediately begin serving a vegan option, even while the appeal is in process. So there it is. That's the case in a nutshell. But I'm not an attorney, so Jeanette, please correct and amend this overview before we begin discussing the importance of the case. What would you add or correct, Jeanette?
I think you've summarized it quite well there, Alison. It sounded great to me.
Okay. All right. That's a miracle. Then Jeanette, let me ask you, in what ways would you say that this case is unique or even precedent setting?
Yes, well, as you've already mentioned, Alison, this case was about students who wanted acceptable food in alignment with their convictions around veganism and respect for other animals. And the students weren't able to eat at the university without compromising their ethical convictions. And I think one important aspect of this case is that it asks the question, should public bodies, should public authorities be providing food according to moral convictions and religious convictions, as well as nutritious food? And the courts previously have looked at cases for food on a religious basis, but this is particularly different because it's about moral, ethical convictions. It's not about a religion. There's no deity involved. So that's an important consideration in this case. Now, in this case as well, the court just didn't only decide that the convictions of vegans were worthy of respect in law. The court actually issued a demand that the university do something about this issue, and as you say, survey the population and set about providing as a reasonable solution to the problem. So I think, in summary, the case sets precedent because it shows that courts are willing to respect ethical veganism as a serious moral issue, a serious moral belief, and the outcome shows that respect for vegan convictions can require a public institution to take action, not only where vegans are in situations where it's difficult for them to get their own food, such as in a prison or detained in a mental health institution, but where food is provided as a public service.
So then what would you say is the relevance of this case for, as you say, public institutions such as public hospitals, prisons, mental health facilities? Yeah.
So the court's orders apply directly to the university involved. That's my understanding of the case. So the judgment doesn't automatically create any similar burdens or legal duties for other institutions, but it does send out a clear warning that to other institutions that they should take reasonable steps to ensure everybody can eat food in alignment with their ethical convictions. And I think its relevance is that public institutions or other public bodies now might start to do something about their catering service. And a best practice approach now would be for food providers to consider how their food service caters for everyone and consider what reasonable steps they can take to make sure everyone's catered for. And as I said, it's particularly important for people in prison and those detained in the care and control of state bodies. But this judgment seems to go beyond that, and it speaks to public bodies who are providing food as part of a public service as well. And I think the warning is, don't wait for vegans to make a complaint. Take reasonable steps before that happens.
Let me ask you this. In your view, what might be some potential impacts of this case outside of Peru?
Well, the impacts outside of Peru could be quite substantial, because I'm hoping that it will encourage all individuals to feel confident to defend their needs as vegans. So I'm hoping it's going to encourage people to speak out, and especially in terms of food provision. It's important that everyone can eat, has access to food that's in alignment with their convictions. And so we might see complaints increase around the world for requests for vegan food. And I think another potential impact might be that institutions would change their food catering service anyway before complaints are made. If they are aware that courts are supporting vegans, and in the UK we have had support for people with a belief in man-made climate change. So, you know, when you bring these two together, it's quite a powerful message for other institutions to actually make some changes before complaints are made against them. And I think in terms of law, these kind of cases can change how lawyers defend the rights of vegans, and this is a growing area. Lawyers can focus on the impacts on vegans and make sure that the evidence is gathered, and you know, they're able to support vegans in their claims for accommodation of needs. And I think more broad, well, the decision itself doesn't have any relevance directly outside of Peru, but I think the court is it's giving an example of how it's connected ethical vegan convictions to the provision of food, and I think that could be quite influential. And I think also what might happen is that the publicity the case has had speaks to the general population that ethical veganism is really important, and people might become more interested and understand more about ethical veganism as a moral position, not just a dietary fad or some kind of a trend. But as you said, there is an appeal, so we need to wait for the appeal to see the influence the case could have.
Yes. So before I move on to the next question I have, I wanted to also ask you about the Vegan Society per se, because I first contacted you through the Vegan Society, and I was so grateful that you responded so promptly to support this case. And you do have an organization that supports cases or assists different cases that involve veganism, right? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So the campaign for vegan rights started with the International Vegan Rights Alliance in 2012. And my intention was to bring about a group of lawyers and legal professionals and legal academics around the world who were interested in understanding more about the legal protection of veganism. I was grounding my arguments in a European court decision that was made by the prior commission in 1993. That decided the convictions of vegans fell within the scope of the human right to freedom of conscience. And I wanted to explore how this had been interpreted and applied in different human rights systems, in different domestic legal systems, and how that followed through into domestic equality law. So I wanted to bring together a group of lawyers around the world who were also interested in doing the same thing. And that's where this started. So when I gifted my work to the Vegan Society, that group of lawyers became known as the International Rights Network. And basically what we do is provide support for individual vegans who are experiencing discrimination and unfair treatment. So if vegans contact me from anywhere in the world, if I can, I'll put them in touch with somebody relevant to them in their jurisdiction. And of course, Alison, I was more than happy to, do what I could to support the case, to support the court, and make sure the court had an understanding of ethical veganism, the laws that are applicable to the protection of vegans, and just make sure the court had everything it needed in order to administer justice effectively. So that's what the network does. We are UK based, but the lawyers are from different jurisdictions and do as much similar work in their countries as they're able.
I personally feel that your participation made a world of difference for our confidence in Peru taking on this issue. Yes.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. Yes, I try to be comprehensive. It's important to set out the meaning of ethical veganism and how veganism is identity forming and life directing for many vegans, and to make the distinction between the ethical veganism and the adoption of a vegan diet just for a sports event or something similar, just for a temporary period of time for some personal benefit that's outside of the legal meaning of the human right to conscience. And it was also important to set out relevant laws and human rights provisions, the scope of the human right to freedom of conscience and the human right to food as well, and just fully furnish the court with lots of information that would be helpful and useful to making the decision.
I'd like to ask you about, on behalf of everyone who's here today, whether they're from the US or Canada, the UK, or the European Union, India. I may be missing some places. I myself, as I've said, am in Peru. So how can we begin to think about how we can take actions in our own countries to build on this case or this victory here in Peru? Do you have any thoughts or suggestions on that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think it's really important that vegans feel empowered to defend their right to freedom of conscience and accommodation of needs. If vegans' needs can be accommodated reasonably, then there's no reason why vegans shouldn't make the request, and that's particularly important with food provision. So we are seeing now the convictions of vegans protected in different jurisdictions, including just a few days ago at the European Court of Human Rights. And the case in Peru is a practical example of unfair food provision, and it's situations like this where vegans can make requests confidently when they're feeling ignored or trivialized or dismissed, or they're not happy at all with the way things are for them. And quite often I speak to vegans who felt quite trivialized and made a mockery of as well. And it's when veganism is validated by law, it gives veganism a lot more weight, and it's important that vegans everywhere make the most of that. And I think it's important to go through the correct channels when you're making complaints and understand the process that you need to follow. So vegans should, first of all, identify the problem. And if it's a food problem in a public institution, such as a school or a university or even a prison or a hospital, then they should ask for a realistic solution, which isn't unfair. And quite often I come across vegans who don't have the confidence to do that. I'm hoping that the succession of these kind of cases will help people have confidence to speak up for their freedom of conscience. And it's important to get the evidence, so you can make some records about food provision, what was available, what you needed, what you weren't able to participate in, how it impacted you, and so on. And you would need to familiarize yourself with the relevant complaints process. Now, these are going to be different in different countries and also in different institutions. So the complaints process in a school is likely to be very different from a complaints process in a prison. So you'll need to understand what the complaints process requires. And you can always speak to people like equality officers, diversity officers, student union representatives, consumer service advisors, and get some help with submitting the complaint so it's laid out properly. And you should also keep copies of emails and letters and also the official policies that you're complying with in your complaint. And then if there's a need to escalate the matter, if you don't get accommodation of needs, you might want to engage a legal advisor. Some universities offer free advice through the student-led clinics, and it's important to get professional opinion on the likelihood of success and also professional legal support for your case. But those are roughly the steps. But if people write to me at the Vegan Society, I'll be able to give them more information and even maybe put them in touch with somebody in their area.
That's so helpful to hear those details. I think all of us, if we're not personally involved with some institution that's not serving vegan meals, we know people who are, whether they're relatives or friends. So thanks so much for sharing all of those details. Let me ask you, Jeanette, you have such a broad and lengthy range of experience with the protection of rights of vegans. Could you tell us what else you'd like us to learn from this conversation, or what else we can take away from this conversation?
I think that one of the most important things that I always like to pass on is that when we have protection for vegan convictions, we are supporting the campaign for animal rights. I always refer to this as animal rights by the back door, because vegans have never made use of their human rights to support animal rights. And when we think about the value of the human right to freedom of conscience and the power of the human right to freedom of conscience, we can see that when we make requests through our human rights system, we can help bring about huge change that is a small step, a contributing step towards bringing about the abolition of the exploitation of non-human animals. And the way this helps is by making sure that plant-based options are on the menu, and it makes plant-based eating more accessible for everyone else. It makes it more interesting, and the more people that take up these options, the less meat and dairy products are going to be on the menu. It may take some time, and it may be hard work still, but our human right to freedom of conscience is really important to support the campaign for animal rights. And that's one of the most important things I like to add to conversations like this. And I think what strikes me when a court decides in favour of vegans is that, through the human right to conscience, is that the law is saying that your conscience is a matter of human dignity. Our dignity is respected through the human right to freedom of conscience. It's one of our most important human rights. And when law recognises that our respect for other animals and our ethical convictions are part of our dignity, we're not special human beings. And I believe the majority of us want to stop animal suffering. Nobody wants to, make animals suffer. And when we realise that our ethical convictions are an element of our human dignity, that's very powerful, and there's lots of discussions to be had around that idea. So vegan food included on the menu creates positive policies and practices that support the campaign for animal rights.
In this particular case here in Peru, we involved Dr. Sailesh Rao, and he was an amicus curiae, a friend of the court, on the subject of the environmental impact of these food choices. And this particular group that's assembled here today is maybe more oriented toward a sustainable food system, and because of its environmental impacts. And so I would ask you, when you come to a situation where you're defending your right to conscience, how does that lead to maybe a right to a sustainable environment? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And one of the powerful things that the human right to freedom of conscience does is create acceptable food for not just vegans, but also climate activists, environmental activists. And the human right to food itself contains the right to acceptable food. But because this is a progressive human right, and I don't know of any country that's actually implemented a right to acceptable food yet. We just don't see this around the world, a right to acceptable food, but it is there in the human right to food. Now, if we had a human right to acceptable food, we wouldn't have to use the human right to freedom of conscience because we would already have acceptable food. So these kind of cases are doing the work of the human right to food at the moment. That's why they're also so important for those purposes. And I think when we've got vegan food on the table through the human rights claims of vegans, then that's going to also be acceptable for a sustainable food system and climate activists, environmental activists, and many, many, many more people whose views and beliefs might not yet meet the threshold for the human right to freedom of conscience, or they haven't been sort of penciled out yet. But I think they could be, but we just don't seem to have done it yet. But there's scope there.
Yeah. I was wondering if you wanted to open it up to questions from the people who are listening, or if you have anything else that you would like to share or add.
I'd love to have a discussion and see what questions anyone has. That's really important to make time for that. So we could do that, Alison, if you like.
Okay, yes. So what I'd like to invite anyone to do is to raise their virtual hand if you have a question or something you'd like to discuss, and then I can call on you. I will ask you to come on camera, or you can type your question in the chat. All right, so there's Rebecca, you're first in line. Rebecca, go ahead, ask your question.
Hello, thank you so much. It's great to hear about this. I expect a lot more action to be happening from this one case. What I was wondering about was acceptable food versus humane as your basis. And I don't know what the law or what the writing is about acceptable food. And so I feel more confident with humane food rather than acceptable, but you leaned toward that. And so I don't quite understand the difference. Some people, it's not acceptable to eat a pizza off of somebody else's plate. You know, I just wonder what that means. If you could elaborate.
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. So I'm talking in terms of what the law says. So the law, the human right to food includes an element of that food being acceptable to consumers who have informed concerns or, issues around food. Food should be acceptable. So for us, acceptable food is plant-based diet. That's why I use the word acceptable.
Is that enough of an explanation, Rebecca, or did you want to ask something more?
I'm just wondering if some people may go off into other things and it's not acceptable for me to have this and not acceptable for me to have that. It could be so detailed. So I wonder, I kind of hate to put a whole case on what's acceptable.
So I think the law would have some limits. It would be based on reasonableness, and it would also be, the wording used, I think, is informed consumer concerns. So it sort of suggests that our secular ethical vegan convictions would fall into that because they're not religious. So the law at the moment has protected religious and now also secular concerns. So informed consumer concerns would definitely be something like the way animals are treated, the environmental impacts and climate impacts. But I think because law is based on objectivity, reasonableness, and so on, a court would likely look at what's reasonable in the circumstances. So that would probably be the way institutions would provide a complaints process once we reach a stage where acceptable food is part of our everyday rights. But we're not there yet. The element, the right to acceptable food, isn't actually part of our right to food. The right to food is focused very much on relieving hunger and food poverty. Because the human right to food has to be realised progressively, we haven't got to the stage where governments and institutions and public bodies actually have a process for our complaints about food not being acceptable. But in the case in Peru, the court has made that decision that the right to acceptable food in that case involves secular informed consumer concerns. So it brings us a step closer to
I
It's
see.
doing a lot of work for the human right to food.
Okay, I see. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, now Sujata, you had your hand up. Did you lower your hand intentionally, or did you have a question? You're muted, Sujata.
All right. Thank you for doing this for the world. It's actually raised awareness more, I think. And thanks to the two students who actually complained about the food. I wanted to ask, while you were presenting and discussing to, Dr. Rowley as well as Alison Hamje, you're talking about human rights. Can there not be a case just for animal rights? A lawyer just coming forward for animals and saying animal food cannot be served in public, like, especially from governments, like schools, whatever, right? That would make a huge difference, I think, to really move this momentum. Would it be even from a legal standpoint possible? Because it's unethical. Don't forget religion, ethics.
Yes, it's unethical. The issue is that human rights protects the individual. So it's so if you're in a relationship with a public body, you can invoke human rights if you feel that your rights have been violated, but that's at the level of the individual. So it would take a lot of individuals to come together, and if a lot of individuals came together to force the law to change, it wouldn't need the law to change because we would all be together on prioritizing plant-based food and eliminating animal products. So because human rights protects the individual, then that's probably not likely under human rights law at the moment.
Yeah, I know. Like, is there an animals' rights law that can represent animals is what I'm asking.
I think all of that comes under animal suffering, the law on animal suffering. And as you probably know, nobody wants animals to suffer, but there is legislation that protects farmers farming other animals. The law doesn't apply in certain situations, or it's watered down in certain situations to provide exploit animals for food provision. But animal law is not my area, so I can't really go into the details about how we might use animal law to abolish the farming of non-human animals.
Yes. There must be other attorneys who are interested in that area. Dr. Mystery, you had your hand raised. Go ahead with your question. Let me see if I can help you. There you go.
Okay. This is a wonderful discussion. Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Jeanette, for the wonderful work that you're doing. I see some parallels with the last presentation about the kind of umbrella nature of this demand being so basic and so inclusive, and no groups or faith or any community would oppose it, in my opinion. I just wonder what can be done here in order to kind of put it out to more than just universities, because I know quite a few universities, some of which you mentioned, they have vegan options as default, and then you pay extra for the others. So, that can protect people's rights. Do you see some initiatives which are wider than that?
Dr. Mystery, let me just say that one of the things that the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine talks about is that the vegan option is appropriate for all religions. And I'd be interested to hear what Dr. Rowley has to say about that. Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. We're always saying that the vegan option is much more inclusive than the meat and dairy based option. So that is something that we use as well. But in terms of initiatives, I've I've seen some wonderful results from just one vegan making a complaint in a school. In the beginning, the school refused to provide vegan food, and through the complaint, not only did the school provide vegan food, but all of the schools in the whole region decided to provide vegan food. And that's because they didn't want any more complaints. They realized it was fair and it was discriminatory. And I had a complaint from someone in 2019 about the lack of access to plant-based milk alternatives on government-run health schemes. And as a result of that complaint and meetings with our Department of Health and Social Care, we now have funding for plant-based milk to early years providers entrenched in legislation. And, there are measures underway to change things in other regions as well. So I think there are lots of different ways we can have an impact through different initiatives. And I think the vegan default option is not likely right now in the UK. There seems to be less vegan options available now than there was a few years ago. So it feels like we need to push again, and I feel like we always have to keep pushing forward. You can't take your foot off the pedal in a way. You've got to keep pushing forward with all these initiatives.
Yes. Given you're in the UK, I'm sure you're aware of the EDI regs, ethnicity, diversity, and inclusivity, which is actually quite widely applied, when it comes to interacting with local governments as well as central governments. And I think this could be a very good initiative to demand. We need vegan options.
Yes. Yes, we have. Vegans are protected in the UK under our equality law, and Section 149 of our equality law also obliges public institutions with a public sector equality duty. And under that duty, they have to give due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, create equal access of opportunity, and foster good relations between people who are protected and with protected characteristics and people who don't have protected characteristics. So this public sector equality duty has been very powerful in my vegan advocacy across the education system. So when I first started doing my work in 2012, it was very difficult to find a vegan meal option in schools in the UK. Now, in 2026, it's very difficult to find a school that doesn't offer a vegan option. And a large part of that was the use of the public sector equality duty, telling the school leaders that they have a duty to give due regard to creating equality of opportunity, eliminating discrimination, and making sure vegans are fairly represented in school, to foster good relations between vegans and non-vegans. And I found that very powerful. And it was used in a situation where a school didn't have any learning resources that were vegan. And through the use of that duty, they actually bought some vegan learning resources for the school library. So it has been very powerful. The EDI initiative can be really useful, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Mystery. Okay. Sven, why don't you go ahead and ask your question? And we also have Paige waiting. Go ahead. Let me see if I can help you to unmute.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks for having this. I'm really interested in this discussion because I was just in Lima myself for 3 months, and a month ago I came up to Ecuador, and Ecuador is actually quite interesting as well because it has the rights of nature written into its constitution, and I'm not sure if it's actually been tested yet, but it's quite an interesting idea. Because I'm here in South America from South Africa, traveling around. I actually met Dr. Rao at COP30 last year in Brazil. And I started an NGO last year back in my country to push for a deforestation treaty in the UN. or multilaterally anyway, globally, to stop deforestation, because all the countries are talking about it and having political talk. Yes, we're going to stop deforestation, but even in the SDGs, I think 15.2 says halt and reverse deforestation by 2020, which obviously didn't happen. And last year they were talking about 2030, and that's not going to happen. So there's no line in the sand, so they can just, renege on all that and make excuses and go back. And I was thinking, that's a really strong point on pushing for a more vegan world, because if we push the price up of meat and dairy products, especially, because that's what's destroying the Amazon. I've seen it for myself in Brazil. The farming will become more expensive because they won't be able to destroy the forest to farm the animals. And that would really help push things in the right direction to support alternative protein sources. So that's where I'm at. But I was wondering if any of the people there, Alison, maybe yourself included, has heard of any food sort of situations where it's gone to court, where some member of the public has taken some institution to court about climate-related and ecologically related food. Wouldn't that be an issue that we could also leverage? Thanks.
I'm going to see if Isaac Peña Lobato can join us. He's the attorney who represented the students in this case. I'm going to see if he can join us. And he would be the best one to answer that question. So let me spotlight him. Isaac, did you understand Sven's question, or would you like me to translate it for you?
Hello, hi everybody, hi Jeanette, Dr. Rowley, hi Alison, hi everybody.
Nice to see you, Isaac.
Yes, it's just, I hadn't been prepared to talk, but thanks very much.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, please could you repeat the specific question, and I can try to reply.
Sven, can you come back on camera and could you repeat your question?
Any other food groups?
Yes, let me bring you back. Okay. Yes, Sven, could you repeat your question for Isaac? I'll help you with your
okay.
There. Isaac is the attorney. He works for the Institute of Legal Defense, and they not only do cases supporting vegans, but they've done many cases, defending indigenous populations with environmental issues like the ones you're talking about. That's why I asked him to come up.
Great, thanks. I was just wondering, Isaac, whether there's been any court case setting a precedent for food that's environmentally related. In other words, the case for not having animal foods, but backed by the environmental impact of that choice. Has there been a precedent for that? Thanks.
Thanks for your question, Sven. Well, actually related with animal products or animal origin food and environmental issues, not. However, there are a lot of precedents in Peru related with environmental issues. For example, I remember you mentioned about the Ecuador Constitution and rights of nature. And in Peru, for example, we had also a precedent in 2024 about the Marañón River as a subject of rights. Also, there are some ordinances in Puno, for example, the Titicaca Lake, that is very famous, has also been recognized as a subject of rights, by the regional government of Puno. And that's also a very historical precedent. There are like I think 2 or 3 ordinances that recognize bees as subject of rights. Um, and these rules are related more with environmental issues.
Yes.
Also, yesterday, the Constitutional Court in Peru prohibited, banned some plaguicides that has been affected also the environmental and the human health. And yes, that was also and also recognize the impact of these plaguicides in animals. So that's a very also important precedent because it was by the most important court in Peru. And I hope and then finally, and there's pending case about a young people, young students that sue to the many institutions of the government in order to adopt effective measures against deforestation. So now it's also in the Constitutional Court, and we have not a date for the hearing, but it's also an important case that we are litigating the Legal Institute Defense.
Are you involved with that case?
Yes, I'm part of the legal team.
Ah, beautiful. That's great to hear. Thank you. Yeah, I think everyone here is concerned about the environmental impact of our food choices. So thank you so much for being willing to come on screen and share. I really appreciate that. I'm going to bring up Paige. She's next here in line. Paige, you're driving your car. Go ahead. Oops, you're muted. Let me see if I can help you with that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you able
Go
to?
ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. This conversation is very enlightening. I'm in the United States, actually in California, and hello, everyone. A couple things come to mind for this. I do work with the plant-based treaty, and we are committed to bringing menu changes to universities, right? And I find the challenge is it really requires, I feel, the students rather than someone coming from outside in, right? An adult saying we need more vegan options. So that's a quandary, but yet I'm also seeing that this sets a precedent that could potentially trickle into some other cases here in the United States. I'm in the hopes of that. The other part of this is, and the question I have is, I'm also someone who's an educator in composting, and what I find is one of the largest polluters is the animal products in waste. And I've been wanting to bring that to the forefront in some kind of court case type, I don't know how to do this. I'm not, but I feel like there's a mass amount of waste that happens. We're raising animals in the United States, and then many of them get sadly wasted. Okay, because first of all, they're grown, so I'm an animal rights activist. But yet, what happens is they don't make it to the slaughter floor. They die in the place. Anyway, you can kind of understand. But there's times where they're raised, and then whatever happens, like there isn't enough water, and so that's, I feel, a bigger conversation here, but I would like to investigate that. I brought that up a couple of years ago, and it weighs on me. It does weigh on me heavily. It's a huge weight factor, the amount of, animals that are being wasted, that are being raised and wasted. And that's a huge impact on our climate.
And
I don't know.
Paige,
Where do I go from here?
Yeah, Paige, let me ask you, is California the largest dairy state in the United States? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Accurate.
Yeah.
It's accurate. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know, when a cow goes down, the mother's been spent, has been used. I don't know if they then render her, quote unquote, process her into the if she dies, I think she goes to waste. I think they have to I think there's some weird legalities in there that she has to be alive in order to be slaughtered and then become the hamburger meat. But otherwise, if she dies, then she just becomes waste. And that's causing methane, a mass amount. So I know it's a weird thing to bring into the space, but it is something that I would really very passionate about. So sorry if this was triggering for anyone. Thank you very much. I don't know where I would go from here is the question. Unmute because of the sound, but I would love to hear where I would go from here on that.
Just if I can summarize a little bit, you're coming from the perspective of, I think did you disappear, Paige? You're coming from the perspective of waste and the environmental impact of waste.
She says yes.
Okay. Dr. Rowley, do you have any comments for Paige? Okay, now your voice is very soft. It's just your volume is down.
I wonder whether I can do something with the volume. No, the volume is already high.
That's getting better now.
Okay. So if you can hear me, I was just remembering a presentation I gave recently, and I said to the audience, we need so many different strands of activism, and we need new ideas, new initiatives. And I said, if anyone has a new idea, then do some research and speak to other people. Make sure everyone, has a chance to give you some feedback and join with you. And that's where I am on lots and lots of initiatives. I don't feel like my view matters, really. It's for everyone in the community to see how valuable people's thoughts and opinions are. And I would say, Paige, air your views, speak to people, do some research, and see where you can take that, because we need all the strings on our boat, as many as we can have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Paige, I just wanted to tell you, I've done calculations on the total amount of waste produced by farmed animals is roughly 8 times the total amount of waste produced by all the wild animals that lived on Earth 10,000 years ago. So this is why nature is not able to handle this tremendous stream of waste coming her way. And she's, this is why there are dead zones all over the place, and it's creating a tremendous havoc in the environment. So the total amount of waste. Yeah. Go ahead.
So it's two things. It's their personal waste, but it's also the waste of the personal body of the animal as well, and the secretions. Because there's two factors there, right? There's the manure, quote unquote, but then there's also the personal body or the secretions that get wasted.
Correct. So I'm just calculating just the personal manure. Manure itself is 8 times the total amount of manure that all animals used to produce 10,000 years ago, roughly. Okay, so this is why nature is getting swamped. And you can calculate that just for California and see what it's like, and then you can take California to court with that if you want.
Let's do it.
Go for it.
Let's do it. Climate healers, plant-based treaty. Let's go. Okay, I'll be quiet now. Thank you, everybody. So happy to be here. Love you all.
The earth is calling soft and clear, not with judgment, not through fear. She whispers through the wind and trees, remember who you're meant to be. We are not divided souls, but living parts of greater wholes. Every heart, every nation holds a piece of worldwide resolution. We have remedies beyond survival, beyond the stories of denial. 1,000 pathways join as one. The healing has already begun. We have the remedy for compassion revolution. Hope for humanity begins today with loving kindness, hand in hand. Together we restore the land. True nature lives in every seed, in every generous word and deed. The rivers, forests, skies and seas reflect the peace we choose to breathe. Spiritual embodiment, a living sacred testament, not escaping from this earth, but honoring her endless worth. Sacred restoration, here in every generation. The birthright to existing in freedom, shared by every life beneath the sun. Beyond our borders, beyond our names, love burns brighter than our blame. From every culture, every shore, we discover what we're living.